Hi, I'm Devin.
And I'm Kim, and we're the Tabletop Times. Today we're going to be talking about Roost, a new card game on Kickstarter. We were sent a prototype copy for us to preview. This video is made possible through a sponsorship by the Redesign team.
Roost is a 2 to 6 player hand management card game with variants for 2 and 3 players with a twist. You don't know the values of all of the cards in your hand. At the beginning of the game, your hand starts face down. Throughout the game, you'll be using card abilities and taking actions that will let you peek at cards, switch cards with your opponents, stack cards on top of each other, just all kinds of hand manipulation. Whenever a player thinks they have the lowest hand score, they'll call Roost. All other players will get one more turn. Then, everyone reveals the cards in their hand, and the player with the lowest score wins the round.
To set up a standard game of Roost, each player is dealt 4 face-down cards in front of them, and the top card of the deck is flipped over face-up to form the discard pile. Then each player will look at 2 cards in their hand and try to memorize them, and put them back in the same exact spot. This will kind of help you out because now you know half the cards in your hand. Now you're ready to start. On your turn, you'll do one of 2 actions. The first action being taking the first card from on top of the deck, flipping it over, looking at it secretly, and deciding whether to, replace one of your cards in your hand. If you decide to do that, you'll take your card from your hand that you're discarding, play it face up into the discard pile, and perform any actions listed on the card.
The other action you can take is you can take the top card of the discard pile instead of the unknown deck. Take the top card of the discard pile and decide whether you want to replace one of your cards with that card. So in that case, it would be almost the same sequence of events. You would pick that card up from the discard pile, choose one of your face down cards, put that in the discard pile, and add this new card face down into your hand, also resolving any abilities off of that card you just discarded. On that topic, when a card is, as part of one of these actions on your turn, placed into the discard pile, you must resolve any abilities on the card. Some abilities will say must, some will say may, but you do have to, if forced, resolve the ability when it's placed in the discard pile. This is only when these cards are put in the discard pile on your turn as part of replacing cards in these actions. There are other ways that cards can end up in the discard pile, but you don't resolve the abilities then. However, there are actions you can take when it's not your turn. At any point during the game, another player's turn, your own turn, whenever, if there's a face-up card, you can attempt to match it with one of the cards in your hand. Let's say, for instance, Kim has a penguin face-up in her hand, and I recently got a penguin card I know for a fact now matches. My card is face down, but I can, on another player's turn, pick my card up and stack it on top of Kim's penguin. Now Kim has 2 penguins, so their points will be added together at the end of the round. That can be pretty bad if somebody gets a big stack of one type of bird. But otherwise, these are considered one card for the sake of switching cards, flipping them, replacing, that sort of thing. One thing to note, though, is if you mismatch a card, you are pretty heavily penalized. Let's say Kim had a penguin, I have a penguin, but I forget which card was the penguin and I grab the wrong one and I grab a goose. I put the goose on top of the penguin card, those don't match. I'll take my goose, put it onto the discard pile, then I will draw 2 cards from the unknown deck and without looking at them, add them to my hand. It's a pretty big penalty to now have 2 additional cards that I don't know the value of in exchange for one that I probably knew, but it is a pretty heavy penalty.
During play, card abilities will allow you to switch cards, peek at cards, and flip cards.
Play will continue until the deck is empty or until one player calls Roost. When a player calls Roost, every other player gets one more turn, but that player's hand is now frozen. They can't have their cards switched out. They can't have someone stack cards onto it. They are set for that round. Every other player will take one more turn. Then everybody reveals the cards in their hand and totals the value on all of their cards. The player with the lowest card total wins the round. Now, if the player that called Roost does not have the lowest card total, they're going to double their score. That can be really, really rough. But if they were right, and they did have the lowest card total for the round, they'll get an additional -1 bonus which helps them out over the course of the game. The game doesn't end after just one round. The game will continue. You'll reshuffle all of the cards, redeal out hands, whole thing. That all continues until one player has hit a certain point threshold. So, certain total point threshold, I should say. So you'll probably get maybe 3 to 5, maybe 6 rounds in before one player has hit like maybe 50 points or something. At that point, the game ends. The player with the lowest total score from all rounds is now the winner of that game of Roost. We had a great time playing Roost. We played the game at 2, 3, and 5 players just to kind of get a feel for it at a bunch of different player accounts. And we noticed that definitely at the 5-player account, it was a really loud and really fun time. We had a few moments, maybe a card was thrown onto the discard pile, and 3 players at the same time were like, oh, I can match that card. Only one of them actually matched it. The other 2 got the card wrong, had to draw penalty cards. We had a really good time at 5 players. It was a very like social, fun game.
We really did. It's very chaotic, and misplays were common, but I mean, that's definitely part of the game, and it adds to the fun of it. At 3 players, I feel like that was my favorite player count, because that allowed me to kind of keep track of everyone's hands a little bit more, because I felt like, at 5 players, everyone's joking in between turns and things like that, which definitely adds to the fun. But I think at 3, for me personally, that allowed me to, maybe get a few matches correct throughout the game.
And regarding the 2-player game, I'll be honest, I didn't expect much from it. Whenever I read through the rules, I thought, oh, this is more of like, this is a group game. It has 2-player rules, but it's probably just there in case you don't have a full group at the time. I was surprised that the simple changes they made to it of instead of getting 4 cards at the beginning, you get 6 cards, really turned it into this interesting memory duel game. It became a lot more strategic as it was you and only one other player moving cards back and forth between the 2 of you and peeking at one player, and that's the only player whose hand you had to memorize. I thought it was an interesting little variant on the game, having it just 2 players, but more cards for each of you. My only gripe with it really is your final turn is not that interesting. Once one player calls Roost, in a 5-player game, you have a lot of options. One player calls Roost, you've got a lot of other players to switch cards with if you get a card with an ability on it. Maybe you know someone's card's value and you can just trade cards with them, something like that. In a 2-player game, since that player's hand is now frozen, the last player to go doesn't have much to do other than draw a card and hope that it's a low-value card to replace something in their hand. Otherwise, it's draw, discard, and the game ends. So that's one thing I did have to say about the 2-player game.
Roost is an easy to teach and easy to learn game, which I think really benefits this style of game. I can really see us taking this to play with our families and friends back home who aren't really gamers. And also another upside is that it's a pretty quick game. On the box, it says 30 minutes. So I think each of our games has been around that, if not less. Even at 2 players, I think we only took us like 10 minutes a couple times.
That was because I played very, very poorly. A couple other things to say. The card art is very, very cute. It features a variety of birds. The art's very crisp. All of the birds have unique sunglasses because I guess they're shady birds. I don't know. But it's really cute. I really like the art. It does intentionally feature some birds that are kind of similar. So like your duck and your goose. Maybe if you weren't paying too much of attention whenever you did a peek at your hand, you might forget which one that was. Whenever a goose comes out, you're like, was that a duck or was that a goose? And you're just going to hope that you match it right. But it's intentional. It's supposed to be that you really need to pay attention to the details on your card. That way you don't get mixed up later when you try to match them. I think our only major concerns with the game overall were the font size was a little small the font size and the images were a little small in the rulebook and on a couple of reference cards. And the wording and overall structure of the rulebook could get a little wonky here and there. But I think that's okay because this is a prototype copy. More than likely, the wording is going to be changed by the time this game hits the printers once the crowdfunding is complete. So I think that's not going to be a major drawback overall. Lastly, the designer, this has nothing to do with the gameplay, but it's something I like to bring up. The designers actually made a commitment to like environmental conservancy whenever they came out with all of the Kickstarter campaign stuff for this. So they realize there's an impact to production of a cardboard paper product, and they want to kind of offset that by taking some of the profits and putting it towards wildlife preservation. There's some more details on that on the Kickstarter page. I encourage you to check it out. I thought it was good. I always think it's good whenever I see designers and publishers trying to take note of the impact of the industry and try to offset it a little bit at least. So I thought that was a neat thing for them to do.
That definitely is. Well, thank you for checking out this video. If you want more info on Roost, we'll leave the link to the Kickstarter in the description box below. Thank you.
Bye.